Good morning, everybody. Good morning. My name is Joshua Berg, for those of you who don't know, and I am the sabbatical minister while Reverend Matthew is on sabbatical. I'm delighted to be here and see people in person and everybody online, so welcome. I just wanted to let everyone know that I did fly back to Michigan this week for a medical emergency in my family. Things are looking positive. The person is okay and will be okay. But I got back after midnight last night, which is after 3 Detroit times, so feel a little groggy. Spent the week in the hospital. But the reason I say it is that some people know and some people don't, so rather than having whispers circulate, if you'd like to ask me about it, I'm happy to talk about it one-on-one. And the other reason I mention it is because I'm so grateful to the team here, Kevin and Todd, and especially Adam and House and Conrad, who basically, when I said, I can't do the usual stuff I'm doing to prepare, they just took everything up and did it. So thank you very much. So with that, let us worship together this morning, calling up the sacred and the spiritual in the question, what is prayer?
Our chalice lighting, I better take this off because we have no mic. Our chalice lighting words today are from the Reverend Maureen Killoran.
Here it is.
In this free church, we come together without creed, focusing instead on the core values of justice, equity, and compassion, of mutual acceptance of our diverse ways of being as we seek to connect ourselves more fully with the unfolding truths of life and of our world. In this free church, we come together without creed, believing that the way we live in the world bears testament to the value of our beliefs. We light this chalice as a beacon of hope for those who have gathered here this day, for all who have ever walked through our doors, real or virtual, for those who may yet find this spiritual home, and for those whose paths will never come our way. For all this, and for all those things we dare to hope and dream, we kindle our chalice flame this day. I invite you all to join now in saying our covenant words, first in English and then in Spanish. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, thus do we covenant. La doctrina de esta iglesia es el amor. La búsqueda de la verdad es su sacramento y el servicio es su oración. Vivir juntos en paz, buscar el conocimiento en libertad, servir a la humanidad en comunión, este es nuestro pacto. And now, if you would rise in body or spirit, and join in our opening hymn. It's number 345 in the gray hymnal, With Joy We Claim the Growing Light.
With joy we claim the growing light, advancing thought and widening view, the larger freedom, clearer sight, which from the old unfold the new. With wider view come loftier goal, with fuller light, more good to see, with freedom truer self-control, with knowledge deeper reverence
be seated. Good morning. And welcome to the weekly worship service of Emerson Unitarian Universalist Church, a home for inclusive and socially conscious spirituality in the San Fernando Valley for over 65 years. I'm Todd Covert, and it is my privilege to serve as your worship associate for this morning's service. Whether you are with me here in our physical church in Canoga Park or joining us online via Zoom, we're very glad you're here. To our members and friends joining us this morning, some here in the physical sanctuary again for the first time in quite a while, I extend a welcome and a thank you for your continued fellowship and support as we continue to seek a balance between safety and communion. Regardless of how you are participating today, I hope you find our UU commitment to welcoming all who come here in a spirit of honest spiritual exploration, regardless of age, gender identity, race, ability, or any other marker of diversity, well and truly in evidence. At this time, as we gather for worship, seeking to grow in love, fellowship, and understanding, I ask us all to take a moment to acknowledge and reflect upon the responsibility we bear, inasmuch as our physical gathering takes place on land once home to the indigenous peoples of the area, including the Chumash and the Tongva, and which was appropriated from them. Let us take this moment to acknowledge the catastrophic damage inflicted on their populations and their cultures and support them in the work to rebuild the vitalities of their community and heritage, which remain an indispensable part of the past and the future of this region we call our home. If you're joining us virtually, apart from this physical space I just referenced, I'd like to call your attention to the information that's posted in the chat box on Zoom. Included in it should be a link to add your contact information to our email list if you'd like to receive our virtual newsletter, which includes not only the weekly service announcement, but information about other online programming Emerson offers. Also included in the chat should be a link to our virtual Book of Life, where you can enter a joy or concern you'd like shared aloud during the service this morning. And if you're online, if you'd like to get to know us and each other better, we invite you to stick around after the service for our virtual coffee hour in breakout rooms in Zoom. And before we continue with this morning's service, I do want to acknowledge the journey made by our sabbatical minister, Joshua Berg, to be with us today. We deeply appreciate, and I know you all share in extending love and compassion and support to him in this difficult time with family illness. And as much as we're glad you're all here, Joshua, we're very glad you were able to join us today. And with that, I'm going to turn the pulpit over to Joshua for a story for all ages.
This time for all ages is meaningful to me. For a long time, I've identified as a humanist, as an atheist, and this is the 7 commandments for children of atheist parents. Yeah, by Hemant Mehta, and I do have 2 wonderful children. The first is be nice. I promise to be nice to other people just because it's the right thing to do. Care for the world around us. I promise to help take care of the earth because this is our home and we need it to stay healthy and safe. Think for myself. I promise that I will think about the questions I have and learn as much as I can about how things work. Think about how other people feel. Oh, great, we have the, the slides there. I promise that before I say something or do something to another person, I will stop to think about how I would feel if somebody else said or did that to me, and tell the truth. I promise that I will always tell the truth and take responsibility for my own actions. And help others. I promise that I will help those who are sad or angry by being a good friend to them. and take care of myself. Very important. I promise to eat healthy, get plenty of sleep and exercise, and practice good personal hygiene. Seem pretty good, I think.
Each week we take up a collection to support the work of Emerson Unitarian Universalist Church. Like all UU churches, we are self-supporting, self-governing, and it is our collective responsibility to support the ongoing work of the church, both in its Sunday services, its pastoral outreach, pastoral care offerings, religious education for both youth and adults, and our engagement with the surrounding community and the larger world. At this time, your offerings here in the sanctuary are gratefully received. If you are online, you can donate via the donate.emersonuuc.org link on the website, or via the Vanco mobile app, which you can download onto your smartphone, or you can send a check to the address on the website.
I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live.
I suppose it would have been about 1967 when I first saw a copy of the Humanist magazine. I was living with my mother in Columbus, Ohio at the time, after my parents' divorce, and the man she was dating, the man who would soon become my stepfather, was a member of the American Humanist Association and an atheist, and a mail-order clergy member of the Universal Life Church. But I digress. My mother was raised in a Unitarian family, and my new stepfather gradually grew to embrace the denomination for its acceptance of diverse theological positions and its overarching humanist values, even though at that time it still identified as a liberal Protestant tradition. As time went on, and he and my mom had their only child, my sister Wendy, our family became increasingly involved in worship and other activities with Unitarian congregations in the suburbs of first Detroit and then later Milwaukee. I use the word worship advisedly here. I'm not sure my stepfather ever used that word, and he might well have scorned its use. For my own part, I was very uncomfortable even with the word church. And I'm sure he and I were unlikely to ascribe any value, if any, to the concept of prayer. Neither he nor I believed in a supreme being, and we located such faith as we had in the quintessentially humanist and UU values of treating all people as possessing equal dignity and worth. Certainly, my stepfather treated me in accord with those values. He never tried to undermine my love for my father. He offered me respect and praise when it was merited and gentle correction when necessary. When the person who was going to stand with me at my first wedding had to bow out of the ceremony due to a work conflict, he was happy, and I think probably proud, to step in and serve as my best man. Against the contention that a belief in divine retribution is necessary to impel us to good actions in life, he, my humanist stepfather, was an exemplary person and a moral role model, even if he had not a traditionally religious bone in his body. I say was, and my stepfather, Ron, is not with us anymore. In his mid-50s, he received a diagnosis of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which would ultimately take his life. And here we come to, I guess, the point of this story. As my stepfather was embarking on his battle with cancer, I was embarking on a journey of my own. Having moved to Los Angeles and separated from my wife, I had committed to an exploration of pagan religions, something I'd been drawn to really since, I guess, my middle school years. Early in this exploration, I read widely in shamanism, and I had the opportunity to participate in an intensive workshop led by one of the preeminent scholars in the field, Michael Harner. My family was, I assumed, only somewhat aware of the explorations I was undertaking in the realm of pagan spirituality, specifically here in the techniques of shamanic journey. So it was something of a surprise to me when Ron, my stepdad, reached out to me by phone in the midst of his recovering from a bone marrow transplant to ask if I would be willing to talk with him about my experiences with these otherworld journeys and if there was any way I could impart some of that to him. I talked with him more than once about this, and I tried to describe the techniques and the results of those journeys and to give him some sense of how a UU atheist kid had grown up to be a seeker after what a lot of people would describe as, I guess, esoteric experience. I knew that Ron was facing the ultimate mystery. And I knew that what he might hear from me would be coming from someone he knew to be grounded in science and empiricism, important to him as a man who held a PhD in economics and ran a research institute for many years. That he knew I was one who rejected the pull to simply sink into the comforts of trust and the boundless and rewarding love of an omniscient and omnipotent creator whose existence, for us, passed credulity. I could say little more than that my work was revealing that the universe is much larger than our minds can really encompass and that we cannot ever deny the pull to explore as much of that mystery as we can and to understand that it ultimately mirrors the boundless depths and the capacities of the human spirit. I don't know how much of what I had to say in those conversations Ron ever acted on as he approached the end. And I have to resist the cliche of the deathbed conversion. He had way too much intellectual and ethical integrity to succumb to despair in that way. But I think of those conversations with my stepdad, my humanist stepdad, often. All of us face mystery every day, in the knowledge that our end is rarely knowable, and equally in the way that none of us is fully transparent to one another. In both of these, I think of the words of the theologian Rudolf Otto, his phrase in German, the ganz andere, the wholly other, which brings forth awe and wonder and even terror. All of us confront the other on our own terms, in our own time, but the knowledge that we stand at the same time all together in the face of mystery, offering the prospect to each other of pity, love, and grace, is, I think, at the core of humanism as a spiritual path, a truly spiritual path. And as we stand together in this beloved community, may we all, one with another, truly blessed be. continue now with a responsive reading. I invite you all to join in with the italicized lines. This is, if you've got it, in the gray hymnal, reading number 517, words of the pagan priestess, activist, and author Starhawk. I, who am the beauty of the green earth and the white moon among the stars and the mystery of the waters, for I am the soul of nature that gives life to the universe.
From me all things proceed, and unto me they must return.
Let my worship be in the heart that rejoices, for behold, all acts of love and pleasure are my rituals. And you who seek to know me, know that your seeking and yearning will avail you not unless you know the mystery.
For that which you seek, you find not within yourself. You will never find it without.
For behold, I have been with you from the beginning.
And I am that which attained from the beginning of the stars.
Thank you. I invite you now to settle yourselves and center yourselves. Let's enter a time of reflection, contemplation, meditation, and yes, even prayer. Consider the words we just spoke together. Consider mystery. If you would like to close your eyes and take a moment, turn your gaze inward and be with yourself for a moment. At this time, each week, we take time to share joys and concerns, both within the beloved community here and in the larger world. Certainly, all of us cannot in any way be oblivious, cannot in any way be unconcerned with violence around the world, warfare around the world, most evidently in Ukraine. Here in our Book of Life, Eric Schmidt shares a weekly reminder that we have a lovely garden that he provides loving stewardship to, and he says this week, be sure to pick up a bunch of fresh-cut oregano from our church garden today. Those of you here with me in the sanctuary can avail yourself of those. And for those of you who are considering returning to physical attendance, perhaps that can be a small enticement. In our virtual Book of Life, Lynn Prager says, it's finally here. I go into Kaiser Hospital this Thursday to have my faulty heart valve replaced. I'm looking forward to returning to Emerson just as soon as I'm able. I want to thank all my Emerson friends for all their love and support at this time. Love you all, says Lynn. And we love you, Lynn. In a moment, I'm going to ring this singing bowl, and as is our custom, I invite you all to open your ears and open your hearts and extend love, compassion, and support so that each of us can speak aloud if we choose a name or an occasion which represents a joy or a concern in our life at this time that we would like lifted up by this beloved community. For those of you on Zoom, if you want to and feel comfortable sharing that visibly in chat, I invite you to do so at this time, that all these joys and concerns may be shared, lifted up, and held by this beloved community. Let's hold all that's been shared in our hearts in this moment, suspended between waves of sound. And as I ring this bell, this bowl again, let the reverberations sweep these among us, amplify our support and our love and our joy where it is called for. May it be so.
Thank you, Todd. We'll now listen to a very important prayer, Psalm 23, that will be sung by our choir. And this is a very important prayer because it comforts so many. Our lyrics today have been adapted somewhat to remove sexism, to remove temper the theism, to adapt to the rhythm, various adaptations. And although the prayer is theistic, it is, in its essence, just an expression of gratitude. So I invite you, as the choir sings, to listen to it, to translate it into your own language of meaning. What's meaningful to you? By, as you listen, being conscious of what you are grateful for. With that, Brother James Eyre, 23rd Psalm, Gordon Jacob. This is arranged by our own Kevin Matthey. Thank you so much to our amazing choir and our amazing choir director, Eloise Porter. Thank you. Very lucky to have you. So as a humanist myself, as I mentioned before, I have long claimed that I personally just don't pray. However, through formation as a UU minister, I have confronted prayer, as well as those to whom it is incredibly meaningful. And it is so meaningful to so many. To begin with, it could be argued now, when I said that I never pray, that I do pray now weekly in worship, because we start worship with a call to worship. My question about the sacred and the spiritual, it's an invocation. That is a form of prayer. We end with a benediction, a hope for the future, a wish. That is also a form of prayer. Many of our hymns, as you just heard, and our readings and our responsive litanies, as Todd read, those are forms of prayer. So I ask you, and especially other humanists or other people who struggle with prayer today, to challenge yourselves along with me to consider the meaning of prayer. So is prayer an expression of gratitude? Does prayer, if it is an expression of gratitude, work? And if so, how? Is prayer as an expression of gratitude even necessary? I'm going to pose some questions like that and then provide some things to think about, some thought prompts, probably with few answers, but we're exploring this together. So here's something to think about from Psychology Today called Why Gratitude Matters. It is possible to feel gratitude toward loved ones, toward colleagues, towards animals, towards Mother Nature and the earth and life in general. So it's not just gratitude expressed to the divine. It's possible to feel gratitude to so many things. And the emotion gratitude, it generates a climate of positivity that both reaches inwards and extends outwards. Psychologists find that over time, feeling gratitude, it boosts happiness, scientific. It fosters both physical and psychological health to feel gratitude, even among those already struggling with mental health problems. Studies show that practicing gratitude curbs the using of words that express negative emotions and shifts inner attention away from such negative emotions as resentment, as envy, minimizing the possibility of ruminating over them, which is a hallmark of depression. So praying gratitude, even if it's not to the divine, does all those amazing things. And further, the beneficial effects, they snowball over time. Brain scans of people assigned a task that stimulates expressions of gratitude. Those scans show lasting changes in the prefrontal cortex that heighten sensitivity to future expressions of gratitude. So the emotion literally pays itself forward. Just something to think about. So there's a very important Jewish prayer. Psalm 23 is important, but the important Jewish prayer you may know is called the Shema. And it's an appeal or an expression of praise to a higher power, to God, to a creator. So here's the question. Is prayer an appeal to a higher power? Does prayer as an appeal or praise to a higher power work? And if so, how? And is prayer as an appeal to a higher power or praise to a higher power even necessary? This is the toughest manifestation of prayer for me to reconcile as someone who doesn't believe in intelligent design or creationism. As I performed my bar mitzvah, even at 13, I purposely just focused on the music and not on the meaning of the Hebrew behind it because I never really believed in a creator and it was mostly an appeal to him. And yes, and God of Judaism was always and still is often referred to as using the male pronoun, although not always anymore. And Orthodox Jews, in fact, many conservative religionists I've heard them talk, and to me, they've discussed how prayer is proven to work. What does that mean? I'm not sure. And how there is a right or wrong way to pray. We teach our kids how to pray the right way. So it confounds me, just the idea of an omniscient, intelligent creator, but one who only answers prayer if you pray correctly really challenges me. What does it even mean to claim that prayer works? And I'm just asking that, because then it means something different than it does to me, necessarily. Regardless of all that, prayer, especially as an appeal to Creator and praise to a higher power, holds meaning for many, many intelligent, wonderful people who I highly respect, including in my own family. And as a minister and chaplain, I must have a degree of deference, speaking for myself. Now, there are many other definitions of prayer besides the theistic ones, obviously. As I've mentioned some, the New Thought pioneer Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, I love that name, bequeathed the doctrine that true prayer is the conscious realization of our intrinsic well-being. Consciously realizing our intrinsic well-being. I like that. And in the book Prayer, A History, Philip Zaleski talks about how the united chorists of scientists, of physicians, and of the public agree that prayer results in fewer heart attacks, lower blood pressure, less anxiety, stronger immune systems, and longer, happier, healthier lives. He writes, quote, "There is, however, a way to approach the medicinal value of prayer," which I explored this past week, that avoids the theological tangles. It simply leaves God out of the question. Even if prayer happens to come from religious believers, its efficacy, the way it works, depends not on a transcendent being, but rather on some power inherent in the prayer itself and the person saying it, and the person hearing it, and the emotions, and the connection. So, I ask the question, if not God, when we pray as a request or an appeal to a higher power, who or what are we asking? Are we praying to? Just a question to think about. Is prayer an expression of hope? Is it a wish? Does prayer as a wish or an expression of hope work? And if so, how? Is prayer as an expression of hope necessary? Well, I was thinking about those questions, and I decided to ask them again, removing the word prayer from the questions. So think about this. Does a wish work? If so, how? Is an expression of hope necessary? I believe so. Buddhists, they pray a metta prayer. It's designed to intentionalize good wishes and a sense of benevolence for oneself and others. What I imagine is this matters not so much, as I said, for the one who is the object of the wish, as much as for the one hoping, as much for the one doing the prayer. And hope, just like I talked about gratitude, hope is also related to positive outcomes. In one study, again, from Psychology Today, see, I get a subscription to Psychology Today. My wife is a psychologist, so I'm reading them on the bathroom going, ooh, I need to use this in a sermon. Anyway, so again, from Psychology Today, researchers looked at the impact of hope on college academic achievement over the course of 6 entire years. And hope was related to a higher GPA 6 years later, even after considering the original GPA or the entrance examination scores. Hope was directly related to that higher GPA over 6 years. It's just something to think about. So I've now explored prayer as giving thanks. I've explored it as an appeal to a higher power and as a hope or a wish. And as I said, there are many, many, many more forms of prayer that can take. It can be music. It can be art. It can be tradition connecting to one's heritage. My mother was in the hospital, would always go to Kol Nidre services just because she loved the music and it connected to her tradition. The hypnotic rhythm of the Sufi dikr, or the dancing of the whirling dervish, or the quiet davening and rocking of the Orthodox Jew, or the harmonious tones of a gospel spiritual. There's sacrificial prayer, there's profundus prayer, there's healing prayer, there's litanies, there are aspirations, there are lamentations, there are intercessory requests, there's glossolalia, which is the speaking in tongues of the Pentecostal. There's sitting in quiet, just holding space, as the Quakers do. that quiet, open space is prayer. So I've asked a bunch of questions, and asking questions is one great way to explore things, especially prayer for me. And another is storytelling. So I will complete this sermon with a little story that I wrote a few years ago when I was a chaplain student. So it's called A Secular Humanist Chaplain Learns to Pray. So this was 2018, before all the pandemic and everything, and I was studying what they call clinical pastoral education. That's chaplaincy studies at Beaumont Hospital in Detroit. And I visited this elderly patient who identified as Christian. The patient was unconscious. The patient was close to death. So I was really the chaplain for the family there. And at the time, this was before seminary, so I was really struggling. Prayer, I imagine, just should be a wish to help those who are praying, help those hearing the prayer, just to lift spirits. And I really wanted to lift their spirits. So my working definition of the prayer was just words, any words that move the heart to heal. Any words that move the heart to heal itself, if you're saying the prayer. And I experimented at the time with various ways to pray authentically, if such a thing was possible for me. I tried spontaneous words of comfort to them, but my unseasoned tongue produced mostly bland and undercooked offerings. I prepped and I kneaded and I baked visualizations. I loved the visualizations, which sometimes worked and sometimes they deflated as often as they rose. I knew I would eventually find the right recipes with time, research, and practice, and I will, and it's always going to be a process. However, in the interim, working to meet those patients where they were, not where I am, that's what a chaplain does, I decided my only recourse was to do what I convinced myself was gifting with prayers that were part of their tradition, that were meaningful for them. I was not armed at the time. I wasn't through seminary yet with quotes or with songs from any theological canon that resonated with me. I knew Jewish prayers, but these were Christians, and the Jewish prayers didn't really resonate with me. So I entered the patient's room with this gift-wrapped Christian prayer, Psalm 23. I spoke to the family, offering sympathy first and compassion, and then I started in on Psalm 23, which I could tell they appreciated. I had never read it before purposefully. At one point, the son who was in the room, the son of the patient, his phone rang during the prayer, and he answered it. So I was barreling through, and I realized I was fairly confident they weren't hearing much of anything I was saying anyway, so I just wanted to reach the end, and so I moved on. Because the reason is I was speaking these words with about as much emotional connection as Alexa or Siri quoting the Psalm 23. And they knew it. I knew it. It was a good thing I don't believe in God, because certainly he, she, or they would have known it too. So I was able to say these words, but I couldn't seem to make the experience holy. And I remember then that I was also taught in clinical pastoral education to investigate what the patient desired to pray for. That was the way I could do it. And then create some bespoke prayer within the context of my belief system that doesn't disparage theirs. And I tried to do that, but I didn't comprehend at the time just how much more involved this was than just making some shopping list of needs. What do you want to pray for? But it required just an actual loving connection, more than asking them what they need, just connecting with them. Or another human being invites you to walk with them spiritually. That's what it really means. So then the son apologized for his phone call, interrupting my prayer. And I felt least like a spiritual caregiver in that moment, realizing warmth is generated as much by words and notes as by the sincerity underneath it. I was essentially insincere. I was essentially lying to this person whose father was dying, and he felt the need to apologize for interrupting me. And then at that moment, he turned to his father, and he just looked at him, and he said, "Dad, I love you." And his father died. It was gone. You could tell he hurt him, and the son wailed. He started crying, and it was a connection there, and I spoke up, sort of, something just came out of my mouth, because I wasn't sure what to do, and I just said, "The final words your father heard as he left this earth were his son saying he loved him. That's what a gift that is, to leave the earth in that way, I told him. And that was honest. It was spontaneous, certainly. It was connected to what the moment was. It was connected to the family. These were words to help the heart to heal, help the heart to heal itself. And I felt a twinge of holiness, whatever that was, in the moment. I just spoke that simple line, and hardly to be compared to the poetry of a psalm, but it was in the moment, it was my prayer and my wish to help, and it was heartfelt. And the moment it finally made sense to me, if any can be made of being witness to death, the Son gave the moment that meaning. It was an intersubjective meaning, and I just highlighted it. That's what he wanted to feel, to say, and I just highlighted it. And after that experience, I understood a bit more about prayer and myself in the theater of spiritual care. So as a chaplain, rather than stage a prayer, I must simply have the courage to be fully present and actively listen with empathetic ears and a hearing heart. And with all this in mind, let me try and expand on the definition I set forth in my piece, that prayer is words that move the heart to heal. Prayer is anything, words, actions, art, even silence, that incites the heart or the spirit to reset and the mind to new insights, to awe, through healing or rejoicing. In other words, prayer connects and comforts. Metaphorically, I like to think of it in the hospital as prayer is like a heart spiritual defibrillator. When they come in with the defibrillator, I come with a heart spiritual defibrillator. Charge, clear, pray type of thing. But, you may ask, and I did, why call it prayer at all? Why not just say hope? Why not just say a wish or a comforting action? Why not? There may be no good reason for the layperson to say prayer. In fact, it may be uncomfortable for them to do that. So don't. But as a minister living in a world filled with people who say prayer and people who are praying, I personally have to become more comfortable with the word. It holds meaning. Some words I don't. This word I do. One way to do this is something a fellow Meadville seminarian, Reverend Ali, told me. He said, when I pray in a spiritual language that I don't ascribe to internally, I'm translating that prayer into my own spiritual language. And that's what I asked you to do with Psalm 23. Translate it into your own meaningful language. Externally, I know that my prayer is not only about what the person may want me to pray for, but also about what language that person uses to access their link to meaning and to the divine as they see it. So then it becomes important for me to pray as much as I can in their language. If you're in a foreign country, learn their language as much as I can in their language so that they have the linguistic clues to access what they need. And with that, let us try another prayer, our closing hymn, which is To Mercy, Pity, Peace, and Love. It is number 93. Please rise in body or spirit.
Everyone of every clime that prays in deep
may be seated. I was going to read the lyrics of another hymn as the benediction. I've actually changed it, Todd. So I will do that hymn another time. It's a beautiful hymn. But when I went to Michigan, it was my mother who was ill, and she had given me this book, Einstein and the Rabbi. And it was on the bottom of my pile of books, and I would read it eventually, you know, but now was the perfect time. So I took it on the plane and I read it. And, you know, and I connected in many ways. This is a more conservative rabbi, so theology was a little bit different. But I'm going to use something in it as the benediction, because there was this rabbi named Robert Marcus who saved a bunch of boys from Buchenwald in the Holocaust, one of these concentration camps. And Rabbi Marcus saved all these boys, and he was an Orthodox-ish rabbi, and his son, Jay, died young of a disease. So he saved these boys from, you know, this horrible war, and then he lost his son. So he wrote to someone asking, does this about the soul? This whole book was about the soul. Does the soul survive, et cetera, et cetera? And this was an Orthodox rabbi, and he wrote to a scientist, a guy you may know. His name was Albert Einstein. He wrote to him asking if there was a soul. And this is what Einstein wrote back. The most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. So as Todd was talking about. It is the fundamental emotion that stands at the cradle of true art and true science. Whoever does not know it and can no longer wonder, no longer marvel, is as good as dead, and his eyes are dimmed. It was the experience of mystery, even if mixed with fear, that originally engendered religion. A knowledge of the existence of something we cannot penetrate, our perceptions of the profoundest reason and the most radiant beauty, which only in their most primitive forms are accessible to our minds. It is this knowledge and this emotion that constitute true religiosity. In this sense, and only this sense, I am a deeply religious man, Einstein wrote. I am satisfied with the mystery of life's eternity and with the knowledge, a sense of the marvelous structure of existence, as well as the humble attempt to understand even a tiny portion of the reason that manifests itself in nature. It was a scientist responding, Albert Einstein, so he didn't offer his condolences or anything like that, which I thought was interesting. But it was a very meaningful thing. And if you get that book, Einstein and the Rabbi, the whole book revolves around that letter. So it's very interesting. Thank you. With that, enjoy your Sunday. Thank you for being here. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay.